Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Well, one of the most main symptoms that I hear about constantly, I think I can honestly say, I think this is almost every single woman that I work with complains about insomnia. It is just like far and wide for women, not men. It seems like it's just women, but that have serious insomnia problems. Either can't get to sleep or they're waking up at like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning and they can't fall back to sleep. So today I have brought in the expert on sleep. Her name is Lee Bougie. Bougie? I should have asked. How do you say that?
Well, technically it is a French name pronounced Bougie, but it got anglicized a long time ago. So I like telling people my dad is the boogeyman.
Okay. Well, I said it right then.
Yes,
Lee Bougie. I'm so bad with that. I always say to myself, make sure you ask how to say the name before the podcast starts. All right. But I had it right. So Lee Bougie, Master of Science, registered holistic nutritionist, is a researcher, science teacher, speaker, and holistic nutritionist. She leads the research and development department at Nested Naturals, teaches at the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, and runs workshops on various wellness topics. Lee is a writer for Contentment Magazine and does media appearances focusing on sleep, stress, and our circadian rhythm. Lee's biggest passion in life is learning and then teaching others how to live a balanced life. She is a certified stress mastery educator. Whoa, I'd like to be that. And is a diplomate of the American Institute of Stress and is based right beside me in Vancouver, Canada. So welcome, Lee Bougie.
Hi there.
Certified Stress Mastery Educator. Let's just talk about that. Do you consider yourself a very Zen person?
That is definitely a work in progress.
Is it? You became the master of teaching it, but not so much. you would hope that, if you did have that mastery, that you would just be like this total Zen person. But yeah, that's awesome.
I do think I have actually made massive improvements in that. So there is somebody I consider a mentor, Dr. Heidi Hanna, and she runs the Global Stress Summit in the spring, and she has a bunch of books on stress, and I've followed her for years. And I got the opportunity a year ago to be in her very first beta program to train people as educators that would work with her and help spread the word about, through the American Institute of Stress, they do all this fabulous stress research, and it doesn't always get out to regular people.
Yeah.
And so she's on a mission to train more of us regular people to get out there and spread the word. And so I did my training with her and got my certification, and I'm part of a community of stress educators, and just that community alone and all of the knowledge I'm picking up with everybody and the networking and learning about all that research. It's really been one of the cooler things I've done in life, actually.
So would you say that we are all severely stressed out?
Yeah, I think it's really epidemic, actually.
I think it is too.
And I think it ties together with why I study sleep so much too, because they're so intertwined.
Yeah, I bet 100 years ago, 200 years ago, there was hardly any insomnia, don't you think?
Probably not. It's hard to know, right?
I mean, it is hard to know. People probably didn't talk about it much back then, but probably women still had it because as they go through perimenopause into menopause, they probably would have had some in those years. But I bet if we could look back, we wouldn't have it because the environment has changed so much. And I think that that's having such an impact on our stress levels and then insomnia, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you look at so many of those other things you talk about with sleep, the blue light in the evening and the TV and computers and all those things. None of those were around back then either. And that's just, it's a small part of it. All those things come into play.
Yeah. Nobody was staring at the big ring light that I've got in front of my face, screaming blue light inside my eyes. No. So
it's okay in the morning though.
I know, right? It is. That's what I tell myself. I did have my blue blocker glasses on prior to this. But I know it's good. Okay. So first I want to hear what constitutes a good sleep. Because I think that actually is misinterpreted, or it's like people think that getting 5 or 6 hours a night because they don't feel tired the next day is okay. So is that okay? What constitutes good sleep?
I think for the vast majority of people, at 7 to 9 hours.
Okay.
And there's a lot of different studies showing different cutoffs and different things. And then there's like this extremely, like less than 1% of people that are okay with less sleep. So there's always, but I think most people who are doing the I'm fine on 5 hours are really not nearly as fine as they want to believe.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
And I think one of the things that's complicated in all this is it's not just how many hours you had, but how much you wake up during the night and what all sleep cycles you go into.
Yeah. So tell me about that.
Quality.
Like so tell me about that. That's what I want to know. I want to know, like, you know, in your eyes as the sleep expert, if you were looking at somebody's sleep, like they had let's say one of those sleep apps or whatever, the sleep auras or whatever those are that measure your sleeps, your sleep, what would be a great looking night? Like how much REM sleep how deep are we going? How many times, you know, ideally do you want to not wake up? Like that kind of thing.
That actually all of this is still incredibly variable. And that's one of the fascinating things about diving into this is that to go through all of your sleep cycles takes anywhere from 80 to 120 minutes. So people will go through the full gamut of all the cycles 5 to 7 times during the night. And it's not like 7 is better than 5.
Okay.
We have that variability in us. And one of the problems when we sleep short is as you go through the night, you spend more time in deeper sleep. Okay. And that's when a lot of the restorative stuff happens. So when you're having that 5 hours of sleep, you're not getting anywhere near as much as that good deep sleep.
Okay. Yeah.
So there isn't kind of this criteria of you have to have so many cycles or you have to go into deeper sleep. And there's some evidence that if you have a couple of bad nights, then the next night your body will compensate and put you into deeper sleep more of that night to help balance it out.
Oh, see, that's good to know because I remember hearing a long time ago that once you've lost the sleep, there's no getting it back. So
in some ways, yes. But if you do have a couple of bad nights, your body's going to compensate. Where the bigger problem actually is in that idea of making it up is if you have a bunch of really short nights, like all week during work, you're getting up early and you're doing too much and you're not getting very much sleep. And then you think on the weekend, I'm going to make it up and you sleep in. That actually disrupts your body clock.
Oh, don't tell me that, Lee. My son's been waking me up at 5 o'clock in the morning through the weekday when it's because his dad gets up early. So his dad can't get up with him. So I end up getting up at 5 a.m. with him.
Of course,
and then when dad's home on the weekend, I sleep in and he gets up. So that's not helping. Okay.
In some ways it's not. Yeah. Because then so much of your sleep and how well you sleep comes from that circadian rhythm. And that's, you know, the hormones, you have cortisol that's higher. Your cortisol actually goes really nice and high in the morning and that helps get you out of bed. And then during the day that should be going down. And then at night, melatonin will come up. So those two hormones are opposite of each other. And your melatonin will go up at night and that will help you fall asleep. And then by the morning, the melatonin comes down and the cortisol comes up. And so you have this beautiful rhythm to your body. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that's tied in. Your temperature actually changes.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Digestion. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why you will sometimes hear to sleep in a cool bed at night.
Yes. I was going to ask you about that.
That body temperature is tied together with your cortisol and melatonin levels and what that circadian rhythm, that body clock that you have. So your body actually goes cooler at night and it warms up during the day, and that's tied together with those hormones. So one of the things that can help get you going in the morning is actually to get warm.
Ah, okay.
That's going to help your hormones go back up and help set that circadian rhythm. So anything we can do to keep our rhythm consistent is going to be the best thing we can do to help our sleep.
Okay. Yeah, so not sitting and drinking coffee in the morning. More just like get up and move around. Let's talk about that because I think that cortisol actually is like I do a lot of hormone testing in my practice, and cortisol dysfunction is probably one of the primary hormone dysfunctions that I see on the test. So, you know, so many people nowadays have this super low cortisol in the morning and then high at nighttime. So what's happening there? Or how do we change it?
That rhythm can get very, very disrupted. And a lot of that can come from stress. So rather than, when we go into that fight or flight mode, one of the hormones that goes up is cortisol. So sometimes it gets a bad rap that cortisol is bad, and it isn't, but it's not in its usual rhythm, and it's meant to be used and go away. And when we're stressed over and over and over again, we lose that nice cortisol rhythm.
Yeah.
Because it's all over the map from our stress. And so eventually it just gets completely disrupted. And so then when you have that low cortisol in the morning and high at night, that's when you get that wired and tired feeling, where you're feeling all wired from that high cortisol at night. So that means your melatonin's not kicking in like it should to help you relax and fall asleep.
So what do we do about that?
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of things. One thing is to really be mindful of that rhythm and wanting to reset your rhythm. And it turns out that probably the most important thing in resetting that rhythm is consistently getting up at the same time every morning.
Ah, okay.
Which,
I'm not doing
like
that.
you were saying earlier, that sleeping in is exactly what we want to do because we're tired. But then that just further disrupts that circadian rhythm, and it makes it harder and harder for those hormones to reset. So that getting up every morning, even though it's hard, because then that will actually make it easier to fall asleep at night like you should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's going to help you get past that wired tired.
Right. And that probably takes a little bit of time, doesn't it, to change over that clock?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then at nighttime, like, do you suggest wearing the blue blocking glasses and stuff like that, or just staying off the TV and the tablets?
I think the better bet is to stay off of them. I actually found one interesting little study that said the difference. Now, granted, this is one little study, so we have to take it with a grain of salt, right? But it actually showed the difference in the amount of time you fall asleep with people that were exposed to blue light versus not was actually only 10 minutes.
No way. Oh, interesting. Okay.
But that doesn't account for a lot of variables. Like, were those people that had this disrupted circadian rhythm? But what the hypothesis was from that study is it might not be so much the blue light, but what we're looking at. Because people are staying up and they're watching stimulating things on TV and on their computer. They're reading the news and getting upset about that. And that's causing that cortisol spike. Mm-hmm. So I think, I'm not saying there's no effect of blue light at all. And that, like I said, that's one study. And it may really depend on how disrupted your rhythm is.
Right. Because I find personally, like, I can watch TV with all the lights low in the living room, not on my tablet or phone, watch it on the actual television. I'm fine. I can go to sleep. It's when I get on my phone and I start scrolling for some reason, researching something, reading, it doesn't matter what I do. It's just that, like, going from page to page on it. And then that's it. I won't be able to fall asleep for, an hour or whatever. So I do notice a big difference as to what screen I'm looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so that idea of what you're looking at and the effect it's having on you is important to be paying attention to that. And that might actually help people rather than being told you can't do anything that involves light, because in this day and age that's challenging. Mm-hmm. But maybe a relaxing book that you read on your Kindle with the right lighting set on there might not bother you. Yes. But maybe watching the news will, or maybe if you're scrolling on your phone and work emails are popping up and you're starting to panic about the next day at work, that's actually really going to be disruptive. So I think telling people, just rather than banning blue light, getting people to think about what the effective things are on them. Are they playing a video game that's stimulating, or what is it that we're taking in?
Mm-hmm. Is there studies that show what is like the number one cause of insomnia?
Interestingly enough, there's a lot of causes.
Okay. So there's no one like major that tops the charts.
I would think from everything I've read and seen and from talking to people, I think stress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Partly because stress really encompasses so many different things. Because stress really, I love Heidi Hanna's definition of stress is when our demands are greater than our capacity.
Yeah, which looks different for everyone.
Exactly. And so I like that definition because lack of sleep is a demand on our body. How we're eating is a demand on our body. It's not just did your boss yell at you that day. It's everything, right? And we know a demand is having a new baby. So sometimes we think of stress as negative things, but if we think of it as just demands on us. Mm-hmm. It's, a hot room is a demand on your body. All of those things are demand. And so I think lots of times in life, we can't get rid of demands. I mean, there's things we can do, like, eat better. But a lot of those demands, when we've had a new baby, when we have a deadline at work, we can't get rid of those demands. So then I think we need to look at our capacity of how we're taking care of ourselves. What are we doing to help give ourselves more capacity? Are we taking little breaks? Are we getting the right amount of exercise? Are we reaching out to our network of supportive people? I mean, there's a million things you can be doing around capacity. And a lot of them are stopping for 30 seconds and breathing.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to always be super complicated, but do you take those little breaks during the day? Mm-hmm. So one of the things about stress, and one of the reasons why I think you can say it's the first thing, is that if stress is any demands, that's a lot of things in life that can get lumped together under that category.
Right. Yeah. That's an umbrella to many different things, right? Mm-hmm. It could be, oh my gosh, it could be so many different things. So besides stress, was there other things like was there actual like genetics involved in any of it? Is there, can you have, like I've heard things like heavy metal toxicity, or like in your research, did you see something beyond stress that kind of was, oh yeah, this is interesting too, of what could cause insomnia?
Lots of things. And one of the things I will bring up, because you brought up that genetic thing, is that there's a model in insomnia. So that's kind of like the worst of the trouble sleeping areas, called the 3P model. And so the 3 Ps are predisposing, precipitating, and perpetuating. So predisposed, you have risk factors for insomnia. Precipitating is what actually started that bout of insomnia. And then perpetuating is what actually is keeping it going. And it's not always the same thing that started it. So under predisposing, those things that you're at a higher risk for insomnia, probably the top 3 of those are the one you mentioned, genetics. Mm-hmm. So you can actually have a genetic risk for insomnia. And that comes down to a whole bunch of different genes around your sleep patterns. And it's a bunch of them, not just one. So it's very complicated, and they're still working a lot of that out. But mm-hmm. you do inherit, for example, whether or not you're more likely to be a night owl.
Ah, okay.
And so night owls, for example, that doesn't mean they can't fall asleep, but they do tend to be, they want to fall asleep later. But sometimes if you fall asleep later, that's everyone's gone to bed, you still feel awake, you start doing things that make you even more awake, and you actually go past when you should have gone to bed. And then it becomes, and then that whole rhythm, circadian rhythm, becomes an issue, right? So genetically, you're already predisposed because of that sleep pattern you have. Sleep duration and those sleep cycles, all those things, genetics play a part in that. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean you're going to get insomnia, but you're higher risk.
Mm-hmm. I always blame my dad for it because he's got severe insomnia, and so do I. So I always tell him, like, thanks, Dad. It's all thanks to you. I can't sleep. So that's good. I didn't know if there was an actual genetic component. So now I have proof. Yeah.
But remember, that's just a risk, right? There's a whole bunch of other stuff that comes together. You have increased risk of insomnia with age.
Okay. Yeah.
So from a bunch of different things, again, these things are never black and white, right? But it's things like, as you age, you're more likely to be on medications that may be affecting. You may be more likely to be in pain, for example. There's hormonal changes, but there just seem to be a lot of things that come together, and your risk of insomnia is much higher as you age. Mm-hmm. And another factor that comes into play is sex. I think you mentioned earlier, women have a much higher risk of insomnia than men, very related to hormones. Mm-hmm. So,
I thought you were going to talk about like sex can cause insomnia. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Because I always say a man will want to fall asleep after sex, and a woman, it makes them stay awake. So I thought, oh, here we go. She's going to tell us about this. Sex.
Sorry.
That's awesome.
That probably ties into our hormone changes, right?
Yes, it does. Oh, that's great. Yes, I would say though, back to what you said, females for sure have more insomnia than men. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just saw this awesome meme on Facebook, and it says, all my husband needs to fall asleep is a dirty flat pillow in about 2 minutes. What I need, temperature to be at exactly 30 degrees, number 2 setting on the fan, door slightly cracked open, window opened, like, and there's like this list and mental checklist of 100 different things, then I can fall asleep. Oh my God, that's so me.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of people. And yeah, Exactly. I think one of the interesting ties here is that for women, our sort of more calming hormone is progesterone, whereas estrogen is more stimulating. And so with the changes throughout the month or with menopause, you're going to see a lot of those changes. And you asked something earlier about toxins. And I think one of those ties in is so many toxins in our environment are endocrine disruptors and are causing a part of estrogen dominance.
Yeah.
And so the more you have that estrogen dominance, the less you have that progesterone calming picture. And I think that's one of the reasons why women are having more trouble.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mentioned that in my other podcast about insomnia, where it was all about hormonal insomnia. And it's that deficiency of progesterone that really gets so many women, because progesterone reacts on the GABA receptors of the brain and helps calm the system down. And it can block adrenaline and so many different things that it can help with. But yes, progesterone, I think, is a huge one. So predisposition and then precipitating. Did you go through that one, the precipitating one?
Not yet. No.
Okay. So let's go through that. Yeah.
Predisposing risk factors. So
got off track.
Precipitating factors. Yeah, exactly. So,
that's okay. We're talking about sex.
That'll get anyone off track really easy. So precipitating, for some people, it can be a life event. So something like, a partner dies or a parent or something, and then the grief of that or just the stress of that situation. It can be having a baby, like events like that in life that can disrupt your sleep rhythm in various different ways. So life events are something to look at. And many of them, it's not necessarily that you can change it, but you can understand where that came from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Medications are another big one. And I see often people don't recognize that. So for example, antidepressants can sometimes have a side effect of you not sleeping, which is sort of doubly awful because there's this real intertwining between depression and insomnia. And they used to think depression was one of the big causes of insomnia. And it's actually looking more now that nearly half the time the insomnia came first. And that the lack of sleep is actually leading to that mood disorder of depression. Yeah. So now you have someone who's diagnosed with depression and they put them on an antidepressant, and that actually causes sleep issues. Yeah. So it's kind of which is first, the chicken or the egg with that. So sometimes it will be the depression was first and then the antidepressant is what's causing the insomnia. And often that's not recognized because people just see depression as insomnia as something that happened at the same time. Yeah. And so no one stops and says, oh, is it actually the medication they're on? And so they actually may need to switch and take a different antidepressant. So I think it's really worth looking at that for people.
I think supplements too. Like I can't take B vitamins past 2:00 in the afternoon. And
absolutely. Which is an interesting one because B vitamins, you actually need them to make melatonin. And you go through a lot of B vitamins when you're stressed. So B vitamins can actually be a great supplement when you're not sleeping well and can help your melatonin production, but they are actually very energizing. Yeah. And so I really recommend that people take them first thing in the morning. And that can actually be part of your morning routine and getting that energy and getting going in the morning. But people read that B vitamins help with melatonin and they take them later in the day. And exactly, that can be pretty stimulating. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, blood pressure medications can be bad, antihistamines. There's a lot of medications. So it's really worth looking at what medications you're taking and whether or not that actually might be a side effect of them.
Yeah, yeah. And I would think sleep medication probably perpetuates it.
It can, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the perpetuating factors.
We'll move on to that because there's a whole bunch of other things to look at as far as what the precipitating things mean.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And we don't have to stay there. I just wanted to say that there's a lot of different things. So whether or not your insomnia came from a breathing problem like sleep apnea, or whether or not it came from a medication, or whether or not it came from what's going on with your hormones, or because you're in pain, or there's so many different things. And so working through your insomnia, I think is actually important whenever possible to figure out what that precipitating factor might be, because what you need to do can really, really vary based on where it actually came from.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So sorry to backtrack on you, but I wanted to.
No, that's good. I wanted you to go through them. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because I always say mine was from having, as soon as I had a kid, that was it. And I think it was just my nervous system from not sleeping, but always being on call, even when I was asleep, I still was always on call for, is she okay? Breastfeeding. And my nervous system just got shot. And I feel like it's just never been the same since. And I'm such a light sleeper now.
Yeah. And there's actually quite a bit of information coming out that really that chronic insomnia, rather than those stretches of not sleeping well and kind of finding your way out of that, is very linked to hyperarousal of the nervous system and your hormone system. Wow. And that disruption of cortisol and corticotropin releasing hormone and all of those things being very, very disrupted, and that state of hyperarousal it can be very challenging to get out of, for sure. And that really ties into what you were asking about the next one, and that's those perpetuating factors. Okay. And that can come from, now your hormones are out of balance, and rebalancing that can be very, very challenging. But it can also come from a lot of other behaviors, many of which actually seem like common sense. Like, I'm going to sleep in like crazy on Saturday because I'm exhausted and I can catch up on my sleep. But unfortunately, that's disrupting your circadian rhythm and just perpetuates the insomnia because you're not resetting things. So that's one of the big, big ones, is that everything you can do to reset that cycle is going to be so, so important. And it's hard to do when you're tired. So for example, naps are one of the problems. People who have insomnia and are tired, if they have a chance, will often have a nap in the afternoon because they're tired and they want to catch up on some of that sleep. But especially if you have chronic insomnia, those naps can actually get rid of your sleep drive, so it's harder to fall asleep at night. And again, just keep disrupting your rhythm, right? A common coping mechanism is alcohol.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah. I don't drink, but I know that there's many women that do that to help.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that helps them relax, especially, you got that wired thing, having a drink just kind of helps let go of the stresses of the day, helps calm you down, and you fall asleep. So it seems like a good way to unwind and fall asleep at night. But it turns out that alcohol stops us from getting as much of that nice deep sleep. So that's that idea of, you might be thinking you're doing well because you're getting your 7 hours, but if you're having a drink or two every night before you go to bed, you're not getting that sleep quality. Yeah. And often that alcohol will tie into blood sugar problems as another big one, especially people I find who are waking up during the night. One of the things that's really worth looking at is what's going on with their blood sugar balance. Because that when our blood sugar gets really, really low, our adrenals kick in. It's a stressor, and we make cortisol to help get our blood sugar back up again. And so that boost of that adrenaline and cortisol response that you get in the middle of the night because of your low blood sugar is what's waking you up. And that's super, super common. Yeah. So really worth assessing that, and people who are waking up during the night.
Yeah. I just interviewed Dr. Platt, who is a bioidentical hormone expert, and he wrote a book called Adrenaline Dominance. And he talks about that. And he says, if you're the person that's waking up at 2 a.m., it's your adrenaline coming on because your blood sugar has dropped too low, and to actually eat before you go to bed. And he says to use progesterone cream because it'll block adrenaline. And I was like, very interesting. But yeah. And so what's your take on eating before bed then? You think that's because some people say you shouldn't eat past, I think, 7 o'clock because it'll shut down melatonin production. Is that true?
It can affect it, and interestingly, your digestion when you're eating, your eating patterns is one of those things that actually really affects your circadian rhythm, your body clock. So that eating later at night, yes, will disrupt your circadian rhythm and when your melatonin is getting made. So you don't want to be eating a lot late at night. That can definitely do it. I also find a lot of people that eat late at night, then when they go to bed, tend to get some heartburn. Yes. And that affects their sleep as well. And then just the thought is that as you're digesting, your body's using energy to do that, and that's going to make it harder for you to fall asleep, to be in that really, really relaxed mode. So big meals late at night are definitely not a great idea, but I do find in people who are waking up, a snack at night can help, but it needs to be, unfortunately, so much of us, our snacks are carb heavy.
Yeah, it's chips or
exactly. You're having a cookie in the evening. Yeah. Right? I tease my mom about that. She likes to have a cookie late at night, or an ice cream thing, or something like that. And those are all things that are just going to contribute to that blood sugar problem. So I like to recommend things like almonds are really good. Almonds are high in magnesium, which is a really relaxing mineral. And then they've got that fat and fiber to them. So that's going to help keep your blood sugar more stable. A banana is another good one, actually. It's high in magnesium and potassium, which are calming as well. For people who can tolerate dairy, even warm milk can be good because it has tryptophan, an amino acid that helps you relax. So there's a few snacks like that I like popcorn, actually, because it's really high in fiber. So as long as you're not like using microwave popcorn with all the toxins in it, or if you're having a good organic popcorn, and I like to put olive oil on it, and and some different spices. You can put different things like that on your popcorn, and the fiber actually really helps keep your blood sugar more stable.
Everyone's going to run out and be like, I can have popcorn now. Lee told me I could. It's going to help me sleep better. That's what I'm going to do anyways. Okay. So when it comes to lack of sleep and weight, what does the studies show? How important is sleep for losing weight?
So being a science girl, I have to say that the studies are actually quite variable on this.
Okay.
So there's actually a bunch of studies that don't show a difference, but it is really, really challenging to study.
Right.
It's as you know, being a nutritionist yourself, studying anything around like nutrition or any of those things becomes so challenging because of the variability between people. So there is kind of evidence all over the place, but there does seem to be a general trend that there is definitely a link between insomnia and weight gain. That seems to hold true in most of the studies, especially when you tease apart what some of the variables might be. So for example, one of the things is that often we think about things like how that sleep affects our hormones. So we were already talking about progesterone and different hormones like that. We've talked about cortisol, for example, and that cortisol, if not sleeping is a stress, that's one of the many things in your life giving you that higher cortisol level. And cortisol over time, high levels of it, is very inflammatory and causes weight gain.
Yeah.
So that high cortisol is definitely going to be linked there with that weight gain. There's another couple of other hormones that are tied into our appetite. So there's one called Ghrelin. I love the name of it because this is what gives us the growlies. It makes us hungry. And they have shown that when you don't sleep well, your body makes more Ghrelin. Yeah. So I like to think of it as this is your body's way of going, I better eat really well to try to get the energy to get through the next day because I haven't had much sleep.
Yeah.
And there's another hormone called leptin that tells you you're full, and that one goes down. So we look at those various different hormones, and it really seems to have potentially an effect on our weight. But one of the other key things to look at is how much we move the next day. When we're tired, we don't tend to feel like going out and exercising.
No.
And so that really adds in because not only we have, these hormones changing, making us want to eat more, but now we're not moving very much the next day because we're tired. But then when they look at studies, it gets hard because it turns out that the people that are really quite fit and have a really healthy lifestyle, they tend to go out and run anyways. They tend to go out and do that exercise. Whereas the people who are more sedentary tend to do even less. So then it's hard to tease those people out in studies, right? You put a bunch of people in a study and those factors are really going to affect how much weight they gain or not.
And that one you can really just tell as a person. Like I know if I don't sleep well, I don't want to eat well and I don't want to exercise. I'm tired.
Exactly. Yeah. They actually did an interesting study using functional MRI to look at people's brains when they hadn't slept or when they had slept, and then showed them pictures of food. And when they hadn't slept and they looked at the areas of the brain that lit up, they lit up way more for the bad food. Not that we should call food bad, but you know what I mean, right? The unhealthy food. And so it looks like that pleasure-seeking behavior in our brain is much stronger when we haven't had much sleep. So that can really, really lead to a lot poorer food choices as well.
Because you're just looking, I think, because your brain, it's in survival mode all the time. And it's going to say, pick the thing that's got the most sugar because we need some energy now, right? It's not saying, pick the broccoli. You need it. It doesn't say that.
I know that's going to make us happy, right? Yeah. Most people don't look at broccoli and think, ooh, yum. And they look at this other stuff. And so when you're feeling lousy because you had a bad night's sleep, you want that stuff that's just going to kind of make you feel good. at least to your brain. Right?
Yeah. I find it I always track my fasting blood glucose, and I get my members and my clients to do it as well. And always across the board for myself and for them, if they have a bad night's sleep, their insulin goes up. So their blood sugar goes up. So their blood sugar goes up. And sometimes, like, I've had it so bad that I've been like, geez, am I suddenly type 2 diabetic here? And then it's just because I had a bad night's sleep. And then the next night I get a good sleep and it goes back to normal. And I see that across the board for people where it will raise blood sugar.
Yeah.
So there you go. Right.
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have to ride that blood sugar roller coaster all day. If it's for really high in the morning, then it's going to crash. And it's going to cause cravings for carbohydrates. So
yeah, absolutely.
Vicious.
And unfortunately, so much of our society is set up for those, the carbs, right?
Yeah.
You're at work, you get hungry halfway through the morning, you go to your local coffee shop to get a coffee because you want to keep going. And what's sitting there? It's cookies and muffins and donuts, and everything there is carbs.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Processed ones.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I wanted you to come on, Lee, is because you work with Nested Naturals, which is a supplement company that does help with sleep and insomnia. So I'd love for you to tell us about the products and just kind of what each of these, like, herbals or amino acids that you guys sell, like, how does it affect our sleep? Because I see, like, in my clientele and with my membership group, I really think that supplements, and I don't think this is about everything. So I'm going to clarify this, is I really think supplements are needed to break through insomnia in most cases. Like, in most cases, you need that extra helping hand. And I don't say that about everything. There's more things I think you should with nutrition and lifestyle, and all of that is important with insomnia. But I really feel like supplements should be part of it because they can really help.
I think so. And I think, I mentioned earlier, looking at what is your root cause, a lot of those things are going to take a while.
Yes.
Or, you might be working with pain medications and doing what you need to rehabilitation to get past that pain. But in the meantime, what you can do to help. And it's not uncommon for people that get their pain dealt with for the insomnia to keep going because of those disruptive patterns and because of so many of the habits they've developed. And interestingly, one of the things that becomes a huge issue is worry. People start to worry so much about sleeping that affects their sleep.
Yeah.
And the gold standard for insomnia is CBTI, cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia. It's not medication. It turns out relearning so many of all of these things that have become poor habits, and your thinking and fear around sleep become an enormous part of it. So I did want to point that out, that I do think those are really important things to look at. And so many of those sleep tips can help just kind of resetting those sleep patterns and things. And yes, as you're doing all of that, anything that can help you get into a better rhythm and get that sleep better, I think is an important part of that process for sure.
Yeah. And CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, that is with a therapist. So we'll just clarify that. Yeah. So it's getting some help, getting things, changed around in your brain can be extremely helpful.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think there's, our sleep issues can be a real gamut. So for people who have real chronic insomnia, absolutely go to a therapist. There's actually a variety of workbooks and online programs you can do for that, just sort of milder, I'm going through a bad stretch. I don't necessarily need to go see a therapist. And that can be, you can learn some things that way too, just to help reset things on your own if you're not in a further down the path of insomnia.
Right.
So as far as our supplements, one of the ones we have is called Luna, and we actually have 3 Lunas now, but I'll start with the first one, and it actually has melatonin in it. So that can be very, very helpful for jet lag or anything with a very disrupted circadian rhythm, because that melatonin can really, really help with resetting your rhythm. Right. So somebody who has that high cortisol, that melatonin can help reset those patterns. It can be very, very helpful that way. One thing is, in addition to the melatonin, it's got a number of great herbs in there that can be helpful for getting a better night's sleep, the sleep quality, so that can help with the waking up during the night. And that's things like valerian, for example. Valerian root has been shown through a bunch of different mechanisms to actually increase GABA. So you mentioned that neurotransmitter that's very, very calming, helps, slow everything down. And so GABA can be an interesting one. There's a little bit of GABA in there. It's not always great at crossing the blood-brain barrier and getting into our brain where we need it. And so herbs like valerian can be good because it will help our body actually make more. So you kind of get those coming together. And it seems to work particularly good together with hops, another herb. And there's just a few of them in there: chamomile and lemon balm and passion flower. So those herbs all really work together and help with that waking up and getting a good night's sleep. There's L-theanine in there, which is found in green tea. And so you don't want to be having green tea at night with the caffeine, but the L-theanine in it is really calming, really, really helps with anxiety.
Yeah, I love L-theanine. Love it. It's one of the best. I think for people that have the hamster wheel brain, like where they can't turn off and they just go, it just calms brain chatter. It's so good for that. So you could even take it in the day. It's not, doesn't make you tired like valerian. It doesn't kind of bring you down. It just stops the brain chatter, which I think is excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. It is wonderful. Very, very calming. It's one of the reasons why when you're looking at healthy caffeine in the morning, green tea is a really good choice. If you're going through insomnia and you need to stay away from the coffee, having that green tea with less caffeine earlier in the day, but then it seems to be way more balanced because of the L-theanine in it for that calming effect. Yeah.
Right. Nice.
It's funny. There's a lot of us that don't necessarily handle melatonin well. So I highly recommend for sleeping patterns, try the one with melatonin. But then I also formulated one without the melatonin. So I put a little bit more valerian and hops in there to help, give it that effectiveness, but took the melatonin out. I find if I take a supplement with melatonin, I am super groggy the next day. I have a hard time getting up. Yeah. And that's just me. And it could be maybe I have my melatonin levels are high enough on their own that I don't need to be taking more. Some people get nightmares from melatonin.
Yes, vivid dreams. I definitely get vivid dreams from it.
And there's actually a bunch of medications that you shouldn't be taking melatonin. So metformin, a lot of people take for blood sugar issues. It's actually contraindicated to take melatonin. So I made a Luna melatonin-free version so that if there's any reason you shouldn't or don't want to be taking melatonin, sometimes as people feel their sleep pattern has been reset, they don't want to keep taking melatonin necessarily. And so, but they still kind of want some help calming down so they can fall asleep at night. The melatonin-free version works good for that.
Great.
And then our third melatonin is actually Luna Kids. So the melatonin is super, super, super low dose, really, really low amounts of herbs. And it's a chewable tablet because unfortunately there's a lot of kids out there that have a really hard time getting their sleep patterns working better. So that's the other one we have. So so I'll just let everybody know for all of those Lunas, we're giving everyone 25% off if they want to try one of those. And we do have a lifetime guarantee that you can return them if they don't work for you. So
wow, that's great. Yeah. So I'm going to put that link in the show notes too. And with is it a coupon that we're getting?
So the code is Luna25.
Okay, perfect.
And if you go to our website, nestednaturals.com and then /Karen Martel, it'll have all the information there.
Great. And I'm not affiliated, just so you guys know. It's
just
to track it.
That's right. Just so we know people are coming in from this podcast. So yeah.
Right. Yes. And this is also for Canada and the United States. They sell to both. So, which I think is great. I didn't know if they were just Canadian or not, but no, they also sell to the United States because I think many of my listeners are from the States. So 25% for either country. So I'll put the link in the show notes for you guys. But Lee, this has been great, very eye-opening. So I thank you for that. I'm going to put some of these things in place for my own horrible insomnia that I have. And I'm going to try the product out and see what I think. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, happy to be here. It's been fun chatting with you.